The shooting range. In this episode, pages of history, Allies versus the Third Reich in the battle for Caen, the triathlon, this time on water, and Metal Beasts, a British SPAA system armed with the Starstreak missiles. Meet the newest top-tier SPAAG from Britain, the Stormer HVM. This is an anti-aircraft vehicle through and through, fitted with powerful and fast missiles. It also makes use of a modern detection and ranging system, allowing it to be deadly and stealthy at the same time. The vehicle is armed with the legendary Starstreak surface-to-air missiles, with 8 of them in 2 groups of 4, stored in the launchers right off the bat. The launcher elevates from -10 to +60 degrees, but there's a catch. It can only fire when the vehicle is standing still. The vehicle is also equipped with smoke grenade launchers. As for protection, well, you don't expect heavy armor from this class of vehicles, do you? The effective thickness of the upper glacis plate is about 60 millimeters, which can save you from, say, a machine gun fire, but nothing more. In the lower glacis plate, you've got 25 millimeters. On the sides, a little more than 10 millimeters, plus a bit of spaced armor to protect you from heat rounds. Reload missiles are stored in the rear. That's where the fuel tank is found as well. The engine and the transmission are both in the front. In between, there are 3 crew members, separated from the engine by an 8mm thick aluminium screen. But let's talk about the missiles a little more. They're significantly different from any other top-tier air defense weapon system. Firstly, they've got an amazing speed of 1,400 meters per second, which is almost 3 times faster than the slowest missiles of their adversaries. Secondly, when the fuel in the first stage of a missile burns out, 3 dart submunitions are separated from the rocket motor, each dart carrying an explosive warhead of its own. All 3 equivalent to more than 1 kilogram of TNT. They fly to the target, spiraling around a laser beam, which makes them almost impossible to intercept. And you can use these missiles to shoot lightly armored ground targets as well. If you want to destroy a modern MBT, though, you'll have to aim at its sides. And in case of the Soviet tanks, it's even trickier. You need to shoot at their bottom and from a close enough distance so that the projectile connects before the separation of the darts. Okay, that's all you need to know about the missiles. Moving on to its electronics. This SPAAG comes outfitted with a passive infrared detection and tracking system. Since it's passive, it's invisible to warning radar systems. And you're using optical sensors to locate targets, meaning that enemy radar won't be able to find you either. Finally, the tracking station has a 360-degree tracking capability activated with a single press of a button, and it refreshes the detection data faster than once per second. So how do you play on the Stormer HVM? Well, this is a perfect pick if you're okay with finding yourself a quiet spot in the corner of a map where you'd be able to stay clear of enemy helicopters. Found a position that fits the description? Great! Time to ground those pilots like there's no tomorrow. If you've been spotted, then it's time to relocate. Thankfully, this vehicle is quite agile, reaching speeds of up to 80 km per hour both forwards and backwards. On the other hand, it's not the best pig when it comes to off-road performance, but you can still squeeze out about half maximum speed while driving through rough terrain. If anything, you've got your smoke grenade launchers to cover your retreat. Also, keep in mind that your elevation angles end up at 60 degrees, which means that there is a dead zone right above your head. The enemy will feel quite comfortable there. The high speed of the missiles isn't always helpful either. If the enemy got really close to you, aiming will get very tricky. So remember, once and for all, The Stormer HVM is all about long-distance combat, and that's how it'll bring you victory. D-Day. It was brutal. There were lots of casualties, but the outcome of Operation Neptune seemed obvious. Allied forces dominated both the sea and the sky. Bombs and bullets filled the air, driving German forces several kilometers away from the coastline, while even more troops from the USA and Britain were still coming. One might think that this was it. They overcame the Atlantic barrier, the Nazis' defense lines were broken, and now the Allies had only one job left: to capture the city of Caen, an important transport hub situated just 19 kilometers away. That would mark a glorious ending for Operation Overlord and render the Allied assault unstoppable. So the troops set out for the city. There was a problem, though: the local terrain. From high above, Normandy looked flat and easy to traverse, but in reality, it was, and still is, a bocage, the devil's playground. The grass there was waist-high, forests were dense, hedgerows turned into labyrinths, and farmhouses scattered here and there didn't make it any easier for a massive army on the march. Mostly because, at the time, there were Nazi positions in most of them, and in the grass, and in the forests, and everywhere else. And those German soldiers weren't just anybody. They weren't green boys who only saw Dunkirk or Warsaw. Those were veteran fighters hardened by the hell of the Eastern Front. Accompanying them were mad fanatics from the SS Hitlerjugend division, dreaming of dying heroically for the Führer's sake. Oh, and there were millions of mines scattered everywhere, and tanks, Tigers no less, with their long barrels, which were built to fight deadly Soviet T-34s, so the Shermans and Cromwells were hardly a match for them at any distance. But that wasn't the worst of it. The disruption of the chain of command is probably the worst thing that can happen to any unit, and that's exactly what happened to many soldiers on the Allied side. British and Canadian troops, meeting sudden and fierce opposition, lost their way on more than one occasion, or were separated from their allies or commanders. Or even with a chain of command intact, they were feeding the HQ with a never-ending stream of contradictory intel. It was pure chaos. Soon, the strategic offense to capture Caen turned into countless skirmishes, a lot of them happening without any input from the command. All big plans were reduced to the clanging of tracks, the roaring of guns, the howling of the Nebelwerfers, with both sides constantly pummeled by artillery fire. Days belonged to the Allies, with all their aircraft and support fire coming from the sea. Nights were the Nazis' domain, with Germans busy resupplying their units or moving them, or launching vicious counter-offensives. The Allies decided to encircle the town, but their assault was stopped near the village of Villers-Bocage by Michael Wittmann, one of the ace tankers of the Reich. Unable to come closer to Caen, Allied commanders Eisenhower and Montgomery ordered massive airstrikes on the German positions in the town, reducing it to rubble engulfed by flames, which also made Caen even harder to capture. The destroyed town turned into a massive killing zone. Soon it became apparent that the swift liberation of the whole region was out of the question. It took Allies 2 months to cover 19 kilometers between the coastline and the town of Caen. It took countless small operations, fighting for every inch of the ground and for every nook and cranny, to finally drive the Nazi forces out. Every step forward was bought with the blood of soldiers, both dead or injured, with countless tanks lost or damaged, and only by making Germans suffer irreplaceable losses. Only by the end of July 1944, Caen was finally encircled by Allied forces, and only on the 6th of May, the last German soldiers in the city laid down their arms. The few surviving citizens of Caen finally welcomed the tanks of the Allies, vehicles covered in grime and reeking of smoke, sweat, and blood. British, Canadian, and American soldiers, tired and dirty, stressed or stoic, they were all drinking excellent French cider that day, looking at the world with 2,000-yard stares and drifting to sleep right on top of their tanks. For them, that was just the beginning. You already saw competitions involving different classes of ground vehicles and even aircraft. But the summer season is here, and is there a better time to go to sea? This is the first naval triathlon involving speedy PT boats. Let's see how it pans out. Here are our contenders. Representing the US Navy, here comes the PT-810. Germany sent the VS-10 hydrofoil torpedo boat. The Soviet contender is the Project 183 torpedo boat, also known as Bolshevik. The British are represented by a Brave-class motor torpedo boat, and the Japanese opted for one of their recently added vessels, the Type 11. The first challenge is a race. Let's see how fast these boats can go. The goal is simple: to cover the distance of 1 kilometer as fast as possible, turn around, and be the first to come back. Ready, steady, go! Engines roar. All the boats are going full speed. The British and the German boats are in the lead, followed by the Soviet vessel, and, slightly lagging behind, come the PT-180 and the Type 11. The contenders are approaching the turning point at max speeds. The Brave-class boat has no difficulty making a sharp turn. Others follow suit. Only the German boat slows down a bit. Its hydrofoils aren't really helping it to make tight turns. Now it's in the rear. They're almost there, and the first to finish is the British boat. Then comes the Bolshevik. After that, the American and the Japanese contenders finish at the same time. The German hydrofoil comes last. The German crew failed to make up for lost time after all. The next challenge is the shooting range. There will be 2 targets in front of our contenders, a torpedo boat and a gunboat. The task is to sink both in minimum time. We'll be firing broadside to make the most of the boat's arsenals. Fire! Our contenders deal with the torpedo boat almost simultaneously. But the American boat clearly has an advantage when engaging the second target. In addition to its main 40mm guns, the PT-810 is also outfitted with 20mm guns and a mortar. By concentrating fire and making full use of its kit, the American boat is the first to sink both vessels. The second ones to finish, almost immediately after the PT-810, are the Type 11 and the Brave-class boat. Then comes the Soviet crew, and the VS-10 finishes last again. Its 15mm guns are clearly incapable of destroying targets of this size quickly enough to compete with the others. This last test is torpedoes. Yep, just torpedoes. We'll need bigger targets this time. A destroyer and a cruiser, perhaps? Our contenders will be launching their torpedoes from a considerable distance. All set? Go! The first torpedoes to connect with the destroyer come from 3 boats: the American, the Japanese, and the British ones. The American and the Japanese contenders managed to sink the cruiser as well, while other boats have only damaged her. Any torpedoes left? The VS-10 and the Bolshevik are out of torpedoes already, but the Brave motorboat is still in the game. Yes, it succeeds in sinking the cruiser on the second try. Let's sum it up. The bronze goes to the Japanese Type 11. Even though its weaponry allows it to make short work of almost any opponents of its own size, the low speed of the boat limits its potential. The runner-up is the US Navy PT-810. It comes with lots of guns, giving it superior firepower. Finally, the winner of this triathlon is the British Brave motor torpedo boat. Speed is one of the most important parts of the kit, and the British boat performs really well here. It also uses excellent 40mm Bofors guns, making it the undisputed champion of this competition. Now let's move on to the last traditional part of our show. The first question was sent by a player called Caen. What are the numbers for on the horizontal axis of a scope of a tank? Hi. The scale is used for quick range finding. If you know the measurements of the tank you're aiming at, you can determine the distance to it by looking at how many marks the profile of the target is touching. The numbers you're asking about are basically meters from a distance of 1 kilometer, meaning that if you're looking at an object that is 4 meters long from 1 kilometer away, it will fill the area between 0 and 4 on the horizontal axis of your scope. Christoph Blach asks, can you guys please put in realistic speed of sound for distance explosions? It's odd to see and hear a tank firing at the same time from 1 kilometer away. Hi, we thought about it. It's not that difficult from the technical standpoint, especially considering all the complex physical phenomena that are already modeled in the game. But we believe that it will actually make combat less enjoyable for players. Sounds are an important source of information on the battlefield. By desynchronizing them with what players see, we will make the game slightly more realistic, true, but it'll also be considerably more confusing. Then there's a message from the Phoenix. Is there going to be a climb in the ranks with American aircraft? Of course. We will cover all nations, 100%. Kopi Pastov asks, hey Gretchen, what features would you like to add to the game if it wasn't for technical limitations? Well, thanks for a very interesting question. We had to think about that for a bit. Truth is, if we're speaking about the most modern graphic cards out there, there aren't that many technical limitations even today. But if we go all out, then realistic clouds, we think. A properly modeled sky with clouds. Yes, a beautiful, epic sky with complex dynamic weather. The last message was sent by a user called J. Vilna. I have played War Thunder since it came out and I still love it. Oh, thanks. We're glad you're with us and we're doing our best not to disappoint you. Our players might ask a lot of us sometimes, but we truly strive to meet your expectations. That's it for today. You were watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment. Like I asked last week, come on, subscribe to the channel. Press that bell button and leave a like, because you do, and tell us what you think in the comments below. See you in a week.